Was the first half of the season a success for Juventus? That is a topic that we will be debating today on this episode of It's Black and White. Hello, everyone. My name is Zach, and as always, I'm joined here by Frederic. Now, normally, we'd spend the next 25 minutes or so fighting with each other on this topic, which I was actually really looking forward to do because if I'm not mistaken, when I looked at the comments from our last episode on Cambiaso, the people chose you as the victor, and I needed to get my revenge. But my revenge will have to wait because we welcome today a special guest on the program, a good friend and member of the Turn Giants family. Jack is extremely passionate on this topic in the affirmative, and so he will be replacing me. Yes, Zach will be replaced by Jack against Frederic in today's episode. Jack, are you dug in? Is your bat pine tarred up, and are you ready to swing for the fences?
I am. The gloves are laced up. Let's get in the ring, Fred.
Frederic, before y'all begin, why don't you remind everybody listening what It's Black and White is all about?
Yeah, sure. This is basically our new segment where we battle each other in terms of certain popular or unpopular opinions about Juventus and the Juventus community, and we let the people basically decide who wins. And what's even more interesting is that the people in the comments can also add their suggestions for our next battle royale or whatever you want to call it. And I will just take a minute to shout out ourselves because if you're listening or watching or whatever, I hope you find your way to our Turin Giants official page on YouTube, where you can subscribe and like, or on Apple or Spotify as in podcast format. And your support is what keeps us growing and makes us do what we do, and we enjoy doing what we do. So I hope the support, even in this year of 2026, will be coming our way. So thank you guys for all the help thus far.
I cannot reiterate enough what the engagement means, especially on episodes of It's Black and White. The comments have been absolutely fantastic and involved. The discussion's has been great. The recommendations, we do read them. We rate them down on our list of prospective episodes. So keep those coming in. And as always, please vote on who you think won the argument. I know I'm not going to be in the voting today. So it's between Jack and Frederic. All future episodes, remember to vote Zach. Alrighty, I think I've covered the most important matters as it pertains to It's Black and White. These gentlemen are ready to go. So with that, I'll turn the mic over to our guest who will kick us off on today's discussion topic. Jack, take it away.
All right. So we are here, Fred, to talk about, was this first half of the season a success or a failure? I will let you take that latter because I deem the beginning of the season to 100% be a success by all metrics. I think first thing we need to do is define what success means. For me, success is progress. On Turin Giants, we've said all season long, we need to see progress. We need to see progress on the field. We need to see progress in the front office. We need to see progress tactically. We need to see progress commercially and financially. I think we're starting to see that progress by a number of metrics that I will share with you shortly, but I'm going to toss it over to you for your difficult conversation of trying to convince me that Juventus has failed so far this season.
Jack, I love you with all my heart, and I'm so happy that I can battle you today because it's a breath of fresh air in that respect. But I have to say and start this off by saying I wholeheartedly disagree because I feel that if the season would have come to an end today, we'd be in fourth place. And granted, fourth place for Juventus, due to all its financial and economical reasons, is seen as a success. As to why is a riddle to me. But I feel that if you have these types of players in your squad, you have the legacy that Juventus carries, you have the stadium behind you, and all these things that are working in your favor, and just ending fourth to me is a disgrace, especially when you arrived in the nick of time on fourth place last season. So, in terms of progress, if we talk about progress, then I want to see progression also in the table. And if we were to finish the season off right now, then we wouldn't see that. So at this point in time, I'm not entirely convinced, but I'm very anxious to know how you see this as success, and if you could maybe speak briefly about that, or talk some more about as to why you think that it's a success. I'd be very, very, very pleased with that.
You got it. So I'm trying to frame my argument because I'm looking just at this season. And we are almost at a 50-50 split in games from a managerial standpoint between Tudor and Spalletti. So oftentimes a managerial change brings like this little short-term energy, but doesn't often produce like those clear, layered statistical improvements. But the transition this season between what we saw under Tudor and what we see now under Spalletti definitely shows progress in my mind. So you can look past some of like the surface level results. The eye test I think has been positive, but the data also shows that we have seen a meaningful shift in how Juve controls matches. So I'll start real briefly with the let's say output. Right, you're asking for, or you referenced, if the season ended today, we would be in fourth position, right? And you want to see us in first or second. I think actually you picked Juve to win the Scudetto this year, and I think I had them in third in our preseason predictions. But you can start really quickly by looking simply at the points per game under the two coaches. Under Tudor, we were at 1.27 points per game. And now under Spalletti, we are at 2.18 points per game. A jump of that nature, which is roughly a 70% increase in efficiency, moves Juventus immediately from finishing mid-table or those or lower than fourth place, like you were saying, to a consistent first title challenging project over the course of a full season. Even taking that and putting it into a player context, like how are we getting these points? You can just look under Tudor. The attacking responsibility was uneven, often player dependent, right? Looking at just Dusan and his simple movements, his isolated movements. Under Spalletti, we already see attacking contributions more evenly distributed. We see Jonathan David more involved in the buildup. We see Kenan and Chico on the ball more often, receiving the ball in different places and getting themselves closer to goal. So whether you're looking at something as simple as points per game or contributions from individual players, I see progress in both of those areas.
I'm not going to say I'm going to agree with you because that would be a very bad mistake from my part. There is some truth in what you're saying. However, I feel that you're still the fact that you have to divide the season into the Tudor era and the Spalletti era. To me, is just another bit of evidence to show that the season is not a success. Because if it was successful and if the boardroom was up to par, then we wouldn't have had to make the switch. I feel, and we can, compare Spalletti and Tudor side by side, and the progression is visible, is there, is relevant, is realistic. However, if you spend 137 million euros in the summer on player depth and getting in new players that you feel that you need with a new coach who you basically prolong this contract before the Club World Cup, then have to see that's not working out after 2 months. And a lot of these people that you paid hefty sums for and even wages are just not up to par, and neither is the coach. And you go for an alternative method. And let's be clear, we picked Spalletti because he was one of the few that was available, didn't cost a lot. So I feel that we're in luck that we have Spalletti that turned this around in the nick of time. Other than that, I'd say the season, if I take out the Spalletti factor, is a disaster thus far. Even though it's not done yet, but if it were to end today, I'd consider it a flop. Also because of the fact that if you look at the statistics, we pay in wages approximately 2.7 million euros in wages per game. We are one of the highest, second highest in Serie A in wages, and the second highest in transfers incoming, meaning expenditure. Uh, Not just this season, but the 3 seasons before that as well. Then we are direct competitors in terms of financial um, visibility is no other than Inter. And if you look at the things that Inter achieved in the last couple of years, and you keep that as a benchmark, then we failed miserably. This season alone, I'm not saying we should be able to compete with Inter. I think that's unrealistic to turn the ship around in one season. But I'd love for us to cling on to that second spot, starting the get go up until now, in order to make them uncomfortable. Because if you can make your opponents feel uncomfortable, that's another key that can add to your success. And then, come March, it's battle royale and you never know what's going to happen. But we keep making the same mistakes. We keep losing points against easier opponents and we let the competition slide in that respect. So I feel that even though you have some valid points, I still think that as Juventus, you're obliged to, until the end of the season, cling on to victory and titles and trophies. And we haven't been able to do that with or without Spalletti. And that's something that concerns me, not just for this season, but also for the future.
I'd only push back on your general premise that comparing Tudor and Spalletti is irrelevant because the conscious decision to hire Spalletti is progress, right? We want to see decisions being made. And I don't have a problem with the club taking risks either, right? It was a risk hiring Tudor. It was a risk giving him that awkward contract. It was a risk changing coaches in the middle of the season. I like the comparison between the two because there was a conscious decision between the end of October and early November when we
I'm
left.
gonna I'm gonna interrupt you real quick. Sorry, Jack. My apologies. But you say I've heard the word progress a lot, and I know that's Turin Giants term that we used to, especially in the post game and pre game episodes that we pick because it's something that is of great value, especially in the footballing world. But I'm gonna flip the script a bit on you. Imagine if we end eighth, and next season we spend 120, 130 million once more. We change coaches once more, basically Groundhog Day, but we end sixth. And in all fairness, that should be seen as progress. But would you be happy with that progress, and would you still equally be as happy, and would you equate that progress in success? Would that mean the same thing to you at that point?
No, no. Let me tell you why. So we want progress looking through the Juventus lens. Let's put it that way, right? So what we want to see going forward is growth, right? Better word than progress. Growth offensively, growth defensively. You want to look at important metrics. I know it's not often thought of, and I went back and looked at some of our results under Tudor, but looking at a metric that's not often looked on favorably, which is XG against and XG for. But there's a relationship between XG against and XG for, and that ratio is how you can measure progress. Because when you put that ratio up against the great teams, whether they're great teams in Serie A or great teams in another league, the teams that operate in that first quadrant, if you will, with low XG against and high XG for, are often challenging for the title. So I don't see us finishing in eighth and calling the next season moving up to sixth progress. I think we need to see ourselves allowing fewer opportunities per match to score on us and creating more opportunities. And doing both of those things, we'll see a team with a level of talent that we have finishing higher up in the table. And we've seen some of those changes happen. And that's why I'll emphatically say that so far this season, we are a success.
If I look at other statistics and I see Jonathan David was bought on a free, and it was something Zach and I were very enthusiastic about in our Scoop episode. Rightfully, I think, because Jonathan David, prior to joining Juventus, was one of the most prolific strikers in Europe. And I think everybody assumed that he'd be of great help to us. Now, if you look at his wage, which is 7.5 million without bonuses, and you come to the realization that in the whole Serie A season, he has only scored twice. To me, not only is that a failure on Jonathan David's part individually, but I'd also call this a failure on the boardroom, the other players, and even the coach. And let me explain why. I'm not going to talk about the Tudor Spalletti thing, but I am very, how shall I put it? I'm somebody who's very proactive in having players have specialities. We have a lot of players that can do a lot of things that are. I look at McKennie. You can put him in 6 different positions, but he doesn't excel in one. We could put Kenan on the left. We could put Kane on center. He'll always play his game. We could put Jonathan David as a false number 9. We could put Jonathan David as a main striker. I want to see people with specific skills carrying the team forward. We have no person that is capable of taking a decent free kick. We have no one on set pieces who can make a difference. We have a keeper that's more, in my opinion, a liability than a reassurance at times. So I feel if you look at the grand scheme of things, and these are players that are here to stay, these are very players that are very difficult to sell on, that have a sort of financial weight over Juventus. So for me, that is maybe the biggest flop of the season. Putting so much money, Exor just put up 100 million once more with a 30 million already deposited. So it always comes down to this. And for me, if you don't get the results in, and even in the Champions League, where I know that we're underdogs, where we shouldn't expect to lift a trophy, but the games that we saw at times were not only frustrating, they were also nerve-wracking. So to me, if we speak about progress and growth, whatever you want to call it, and we can do better than we did last year, I'm all for it. Only and only if we can once again try to achieve the same results next season or do better. If not, to me, everything below that is a failure. So I can see where you're coming from, but for me, with the money, with everything behind us and the things that we are capable of doing and we show at times, I still feel that we've been performing subpar on every level.
Progress is progress, though, right? So we go back and look, are we performing better now than we were at the beginning of the season? Are we performing better now than we were at the beginning of the calendar year? I'd say yes. And here, just to throw a number at you, going back and looking at how the team was performing under Tudor, going back to when he was hired in late March of 2025, Juve, under his tenure, was giving away just a hair over 14 shots a game. Shots on, right? Excuse me, shots, not shots on target, shots. Since Spalletti has taken over, that number is now down to 8.5. That's a 40% improvement in shots that were allowed. A reduction in 40% of shots allowed is enormous for at an elite level of football that the team is playing. And they're defending better. They're defending better between the lines. So we haven't changed a single defender between the end of March and now the beginning of January the following year. And they're not just defending better because they tackle better or they're tighter in their coverages. They're defending better because the support is there. They're defending better because we concede less. They're defending better because the opponents can't shoot. They don't have
We
time.
we missed we missed Bremer for a while though. I mean, that's a huge
Both
factor
ends.
in the defense.
True. True. Both sides, though. Tudor did miss some games with Bremer, but so did Spalletti.
To me, the whole fact of the matter to me is that if you're Juventus and if you're pumping in enormous amounts of money, I miss the grand scheme of things. I miss the time where you saw a vision, determination, leadership, and granted, under Spalletti, it's clearly evolving, coming back. I'm still not convinced that the way that we're the way that we're following our route is the way to go. Not just in terms, not in terms of coach, but in terms of players and boardroom. So I think we're almost at our piece with things we need to say. But I'll ask you one question, Jack.
Mhm.
What do you think realistically? Because in the premise that you think that the season's a success already, what would make this season realistically an absolute success in terms of league standings at the end of May for you? Realistically.
For me, realistically, I'm happy to be able to still stand by what my prediction was at the beginning of the season or before the season started. I think a third place finish is realistic for us, and I would deem that a success. It's a step in the right direction from last year, and I think considering all of the changes in the front office, the changes in coaching, and I'm sure some of the changes we're going to see not only to the balance sheet but on the team sheet, with some players' contracts expiring, etc. I think that sets us up going into next year to continue building on the success for this year. So, framing it from a table perspective, I think a third place finish in my mind would be a success for this season.
For me, it's second. If it's not second, which already is something that I'm not overly happy in saying, but I think realistically, we're not title contenders at this point, nor will we ever be at any given point this season. But I think if we don't finish second, then for me, the season's a failure. I think with this core of players that you have, you should be able to do better regardless of the coach. And I still feel that if you see that there are certain things missing within a team, we're way past the first week of transfer market. We still haven't done anything. I feel that's a bit nerve-wracking at this point because you see that there are very, very big holes in the team at certain areas. And if we don't do anything to remedy them, then it's going to make the season a bit more stressful for us, especially when Spalletti, who's done so well, has asked for certain reinforcements. So I'll even go as far as saying if we don't get reinforcements in, that's already considered like a notch in my book as into contributing to a disastrous season.
Well,
Yeah.
it's clear. It's clear from the discussion between Jack and Frederic that this remains, to our panel, a black and white issue. But what's most important to us is not what these goofballs have said. It's what you guys think now that we're after Sassuolo, 19 games played. You tell us in the comments who you whether you think the first half has been a success or a failure, and who you agreed with who spoke today. Your feedback is really what we're looking for here, and we really appreciate it. Frederic, as always, good to see you, good to talk with you. Jack, super special to have you on the show today. Thank you for stepping in for me to duke it out with my favorite partner. Appreciate you and your time and your arguments. And everybody, until we see you again, as always, Forza Juve.